Welcome to Let's Speak on It. Welcome. Tonight we are back. I'm getting a feedback. Welcome everybody in the chat. Triple Leon. Let's see how it goes. Ken, Janet, the feedback is coming from you. Ken, welcome. Alicia, welcome. Leon, everybody in the chat, welcome to Let's Speak on It. Tonight's topic is a rather interesting topic. Tonight we're going to be talking about why didn't he marry me? Marriage or singledom. You know, so there's quite a few perspective on marriage and staying single and where marriage is at now, given the changes in generation and stuff. So we are going to get into that tonight. Before we get started, please like and share out the stream. Before we get all the way into this topic. So I'm gonna have Janet go ahead and recap last week's show. Again, I'm Shar. That's the Miki Chronicles, otherwise known as Janet. And then we also have Clive Williams with us tonight. Thanks for joining, Troopsy, Barbara, Miss Chin. Welcome. All right, can you give a recap of last week's show, Janet?
All right. Hi, guys. Thank you for joining us for Let's Speak on It. And this is our week 3. And so we're running through these topics really quickly, which, I mean, it's surprising that we're already like literally halfway through. We only have 2 shows left. Last week, we spoke about our relationship with our mothers, and that was definitely such, I mean, we went over the time. Let me just say that, but it was worth it. It was definitely worth it. We had Poppy Show, J.A. on the show. Thank you so much, Poppy Show, for coming on. And it was definitely an interesting conversation. And from that, you know, we did touch on a little bit what we're going to talk about today. Because what we do realize is that a lot of our foundation relationships sort of informs the secondary relationships that happen when we grow older. And so you're expected to grow up and have children and get married and such and such. So we wanted to set that foundation. The week before we spoke about, you know, relationship with our father. So we talked about the home relationships a lot. And so I'm happy that we get to talk about that. And if you haven't watched any of the previous shows, you could go back and watch it on my channel, Shar's channel, or you can catch it on Where Itz At, YouTube's channel as well. So last we talked about our relationship with our mothers, you know, how that affects us, but we did jump into a whole lot of things, and it was such a great conversation to have. So if you were here, thank you so much for joining, and of course, thank you again for coming back today. So as the only single person here, I think it's only fair for me to, and I use single loosely, single person here. I think it's only fair for me to be the one that really, you know, kind of spearhead this conversation. Because if I'm single and potentially ready to mingle, I might have questions. I know you guys in the audience might have questions too. Mr. Williams, we have been married for quite some time, as it, you know, it's my info. And Shar and I technically started planning her wedding to Mr. Jur in US Library. So, and I mean, I've been in 2 weddings, and from jump, you know, planned and executed. I was maid of honor in one. I was a bridesmaid in one. So I've seen weddings, and of course, but after the wedding, you know, comes the real relationship. After the big dress and eat up the people and food and all that kind of thing, comes the real relationship. So I have questions. I have things. There are things that a lot of us take for granted when it comes to relationships, and there is this whole idea. Someone says when you're married, it's different. Marriage is different. It's not just you living together. It's not just that. So I want to ask Clive, what is the single most important advice you would give to an engaged couple? So you're done, decide, okay, this person is mine, I'm yours, we're going to take it to the next level, and you're engaged. What is the single most, you know, advice you would give to them off the bat about marriage? And I'll put it to both of you.
Well, first of all, Jan, the premise is kind of odd. You said once you decide that this person is yours,
Well,
right?
let me, and that's loose. that's
Once
that's that's
once
that's okay. Let me just
once
keep
we
going. Let me wheel back. Let me
did you
step
want to
back.
rephrase that? Yeah,
I
yeah.
definitely do want to rephrase that. You've made a commitment to each other, decide to step into the next threshold of life and relationship. And a gentleman has asked, or we've seen of late, where young women, have taken the step to say, "Hey, sir, would you have my hand in marriage?" And you've taken that step to propose marriage to someone. If you're at that point in your relationship, what would be the single most advice that you'd have for that person entering into that next level commitment type of situation?
Well, I'll try to answer that part of the question, but I want to come to the whole matter of marriage, commitment, and relationship from a different perspective.
Okay.
Because I believe, like anything else, there should be a setup, there should be a preparation period, very much like the learning process we go through in school. I think that's maybe a decent analogy. You move from one grade level to the next based on the assessment of the system that determines whether or not you go to the next grade. I I had an unfair start in that I was married before, and so my second marriage is now approaching 50 years. Now, the the common opinion, the very regular feeling that people have is that once you're married, then the first marriage is an indicator that the second might not work. For me, that's not the truth at all. For me, what it did was educate me enough to understand that getting into a second relationship, there are a set of rules that I have to learn. There's a process that I have to educate myself on in order to make this work. So, what advice would I give to people? Well, that depends. You see, it's a general question, but that depends on how that relationship started. What made them determine that they're meant for each other? So here's where it gets complicated. Uh, Most people, because 55% of marriages don't last, it means that 45% somehow succeed, limp along, some not so good, some really good. But before the whole thing begins, Jan, what has to happen is what should happen in the ideal sense of the word is that people should get to know each other. Unfortunately, that does not happen. I'm a firm believer that people should also get some kind of counseling, some kind of advice, sage advice from people who have been in the institution, as we call it, of marriage. That doesn't happen. Uh, Now, we don't want to take away people's rights and freedoms, the right to cohabit with whom they want to cohabit with, marry who they want to marry. But I'm just saying, as a precursor to marriage, we need to understand exactly what it is we're getting into. And then we make the commitment. Once you make the commitment, I think the process begins where you really begin to learn about each other. It you see, when you first meet, you're presenting, you're sending your emissary. It's not you. You're sending a representative to that person, and that person is sending a representative to you. You really don't know the real person. Now, so what I recommend before marriage, let me ask you a question. How many ladies who are listening to me, and how many men for that matter, have dated for at least 6 months, going places together, sharing whatever each other likes to do. For example, if the lady likes to go to a particular restaurant, or she likes to walk in the park, or she likes to go to the beach, how much time does the man spend in pursuing her likes with her? And on the contrary, if the male likes to play a sport, whether it be soccer, whether it be basketball, whatever the sport, does she show up with him when he goes to play his sports? Why is this important? Because it gives you an absolute look into the individual. You see how somebody operates playing sports. It gives you an insight in their personality. You see how the lady behaves when she's on the beach, when she's playing volleyball, or when she is just enjoying the ambiance of the moment. You get a sense of what that person is like, more so than you get having a conversation with that person. So I'm saying that people should inform themselves of each other clearly before they take that step to get married. You should know something about each other. You should know what I like. I should know what you dislike. We should have a sense of what makes each other happy. So we move from that stage to the phase where someone decides to make a commitment. These days, sometimes the woman does. Sometimes the woman takes the lead. My personal feeling, and this might be a little bit of old-fashioned rhetoric here, but it still applies. I think it's the responsibility of the male to do the chasing. And the reason I say that is because males are wired like that. Psychologically, we're wired like that. And so when the male does the approach and the follow-up and the chasing, it makes for a more interesting relationship. When the lady, the female, is treated with a certain deference, with a certain amount of respect and love, then both parties begin to realize exactly where they are in the relationship. At this point, somebody decides to make a commitment, and somebody, based on the tradition that we have, you decide to get married. At that point, you would be amazed. Now you're entering into a contract. Before, it was an informal arrangement. Now you're entering into a contract because you have vowed before witnesses that you are part of this marriage. Both people are responsible to make it work. Not one. Both people have to give 100%. Invariably, and I'm going to tell you this, and this might become shocking to many women, but invariably, the success of a marriage depends, I would say, on an 80-20 basis. Why do I say that? 80% effort by the woman. Why is the burden always on the woman? Simply because she is smarter, she is more resilient, she is more responsible, she is often wiser. So therefore, the woman is sort of burdened with the responsibility of being the one that makes this marriage work. Does that mean that it absolves the man of responsibility? No, it doesn't. It just means that the example that the woman sets, the respect she demands, the example she sets as a wife and ultimately a mother, will inspire that male to be a better person. Men, by virtue of the psychological upbringing, which we can't change in a heartbeat, consider themselves hunters. They consider themselves wanting to have more free time than often they deserve. The responsibilities of the home is something that the woman has to constantly remind the male of. Should this be so? No, maybe not. It should be 50-50, but it doesn't work out that way. And I think one of the real, and furthermore, one of the expectations of the female is that, it's the story, this great story, the kind of Cinderella story. Everything is going to work out really wonderful, and life is going to be beautiful once you're married. Doesn't happen. So there are certain practical approaches that have to be taken once a commitment is made, and we'll talk about commitment a little bit more.
We were both mute. I'm gonna jump in on that because I think what you said a while ago kind of piggybacked on last week's, where we were saying that the women need to demand more. Still echoing from you, Janet. Where the women need to demand more from the men. When you said the 80-20 rule, I don't necessarily agree with the 80-20 because I do believe when it comes on to actually making it work, I really don't think in my situation that I give 80 and the other person gives 20. I think in my situation, we contribute equally. We bring different skill sets to the table, but I do believe we contribute equally. And I think relationships or marriages, now and back then, completely different eras. I think now women are no longer doing 80. I think now women have wised up. That's why I feel like there's so many, it contributes to a lot of the failures in marriages as well, because they give this much, and if you don't meet right here, then it goes away. They're not going past the 50 line. They're sticking at the 50 line. So therefore, they're not going over it. And the guy's not coming past 20. So there's that 20% right in there, that there's a gap. And then that causes the relationship to just crumble right there. Because I don't feel like females are giving 80% anymore. I honestly don't.
Lest I be misunderstood, the 80-20 that I refer to is the attitude, not anything else. We're talking, referring specifically to attitude.
The attitude, all right.
The male attitude versus the female attitude. The male attitude, I rate at around 20% based on the results that I've seen.
Okay.
But yeah, and it is the female attitude, I believe, that keeps the vigilance of the female, the responsibility that the female takes, and attitudinally is what helps to build that male response to the relationship, right? So nothing else, no material sharing, nothing else that the 80-20 rule applies to. I'm just talking about the attitude.
The attitude,
and,
okay.
And I see a comment that a bit old school, but let me respond to a bit old school. Is there a better school? Harvard is an old school. Oxford is an old school. And I'm taking this both literally and figuratively. If we have a better mousetrap, then I want somebody to tell me what that better mousetrap is, because the new school ain't working. Not only are relationships not working, but it's not transforming into marriages. So when someone talks about old school, it's an excuse for not wanting to face the reality. There are some things that are old, yes, but they remain true until this day. One of those facts is that mankind, with all the improvements we've made in our lives, with all the scientific breakthroughs we've had, the technological achievements, the average man's heart has not changed. His mind has not changed. How about that? So everything is old school, really.
Mm-hmm. Got it, you're on mute.
My bad. I was going to say, you mentioned something about the whole starting of the meeting and greeting and talking to, which kind of brings to another point. Getting to the engagement, getting to the marriage is one thing, and if you're in a relationship, you believe in ultimatum. How do you feel about those things in terms of, we've been together for 5 years, we've been together for 10 years, we've been together for this, you haven't asked for my hand in marriage, we've been living together, we have this amount of kids, we've done all these things together. Do you think that in that instance, no matter what their relationship status is, do you believe that a marriage ultimatum is something that's positive? And do you think marriages started on ultimatum clause?
Jan, could you flesh that out for me?
All
Flesh
right.
that
So,
thought out. Yeah.
so say for example, I get into some kind of relationship. Say if I'm Patsy. I'm Patsy, and I'm in a relationship with Tom for 3 years. Tom and I were friends. We got into a relationship for 3 years, and then we had a child, and then we continue to have, we live together, moving together. But we have had talks of marriage. We've had, conversations and everything, and this is our relationship. We're not seeing anyone or anything like that. And then you decide on year 5, because of course, if you've been together for like 5, 6, 7 years, there is sort of this quote unquote expectation that, you are going to get married, right? After a certain while, because it's obvious you're living together, you have a child together or children together, there's this expectation of a further commitment. The next step is coming, but Tom is not making that step. Tom isn't doing anything to say, okay, Patsy, we're gonna have this relationship. We're gonna be married couple. We're gonna live as married people. And so from year 8, you're like, Tom, we've been together for such and such time. I think it's time that we get married. And if you don't marry to me by such and such time, I'm going to leave.
Before you answer, Clive, I feel like you added too many layers to that, Janet. So, because you're complicating the situation. Essentially, it's just what is your views on ultimatum? If we've been in a relationship and I'm saying it's year 2, I need to get married. If we don't get married, I'm leaving. And I'm saying that to the man, like, what's your take on that? Do you think that it's something that works? Do you think that it's something that shouldn't be done? Like, what's your opinion on that?
What's the conversation that happened before that? And 1, the conversation, and 2, the observation that you were making during the first 6 months of this relationship. Let's time it out. What kind of observations were you making? Were you really evaluating the relationship at each phase and analyzing the results of your assessment to see the direction that the other party is going? In other words, have you been vigilant? Because after year 2, there ought to be very serious indication that a commitment should be made. So who started the conversation, and when did the conversation start? I am not, I'm not naive enough to believe that people should get together, get married before spending time together. I certainly believe that you should spend some time together. But how is that time spent? Is that time being spent, not necessarily living in your head, but analyzing the person and assessing the person, understanding the person as to, 1, how do they commit in matters of their job? How do they commit in matters of their relationships with family members? Do they tell their sister, their brother, their mom that, Mom, I'm going to show up weekend? Do they show up on the weekend? That kind of signal is an indicator that this person might not be very reliable. So you watch that. How often do they promise their mom or their brother or any other relative that they're going to show up and they don't? How do they conduct themselves with their job or their whatever it is that they do professionally or in business? What is their attitude? How do they treat people? Are you making observations? It's not just you're not living in a cocoon together. You are being impacted on by forced relationships and relationships you choose to be in. Is that person's behavior being observed? In other words, paying attention, awareness. And I think I think we talked about emotional intelligence a little bit last week. I think Sharon, you raised that issue, and I think we ought to focus on that right now. You know, we've had a tremendous amount of learning right now in this area of neuropsychology, neurophysiology, and how people behave.
Mhm.
And I think we ought to start observing a little bit more rather than working off our emotions. Why not use a little bit of our left brain and begin to assess what people do, what people say, how they behave, and begin to make our determination based on that, rather than being in a relationship for 2 years, sucking it up, not saying anything, and then at the end of this 2 years, you say, "Look, we've been in a relationship for 2 years. Why aren't we getting married?" But should you be getting married? Really? It could be that your observations and your assessments are telling you that this is not maybe a compatible situation. Listen to yourself. And, again, we used to listen to our hearts, which really is our guide. Are we listening? Are we using the gifts that, the Creator has given us? Not only observation, but common sense. Are we take, does this person keep their promises? Do they lie? Do they obfuscate? Do they treat other people badly? But as long as they treat you well, it's okay. But then if they treat other people badly, isn't that a reflection on what you're going to be dealing with? So all these observations, and women, here's the thing: women know, having counseled, women know what they're getting into. They just refuse to listen to the instinct and the intelligence that they have. So my job, my mission is to help women to understand that they need to arouse that sense that you have, that that third eye that you have, that ability that you have to perceive the perception, what is happening in that relationship, and do not pursue that relationship when the danger signals present themselves.
Um,
So if you follow that rule, it will give you a chance, at least better than a 50-50 chance of having a workable relationship.
I feel like we get too caught up. Always a feedback. I feel like we get caught up with what society expects. I feel like we get caught up with that because if you're with a person for, let's say, 2 years, they're like, so when are you getting married? I know it continues because once you get married, when are you having a child? Once you have one child, when are you having the next child? And we get so wrapped up in what society thinks our life should be, as opposed to what it actually is, what reality is, and the reality that we're facing. I find that females sometimes are so afraid to start over as well. So even if they see 20 different red flags, they still sit in the situation because they're like, damn, if I come out of this, I'm gonna have to try to get to know this person. I'm like 30. I want to have a kid. Like, let me just stay and see if it will get better and waste more time. So I feel like a lot of these situations can be avoided if, like you said, we pay attention to female intuition, and you know when something isn't right. You know when a situation isn't right. Because if before you're married, you can't stand the fact that he won't close the bedroom door at night, when you get married, best believe you're going to even be more irritated that he's not closing that door. Because in your mind, when you get married, a switch goes off and something, this person magically turns into Prince Charming and he starts to doing everything that he never done before. That's not the case. The person you knew before marriage is the person after marriage. If he didn't close the door then, he's not going to close it. So if you can live with him not closing the door, fine. But don't get married and then start arguing with him about the same issue. That no, it doesn't work that way. So if we really do sit down and really listen to our emotions, our feelings, our heart, listen to the red flags, and really pay attention, we could avoid a lot of these errors. We would avoid a lot of these divorces. We would avoid a lot of these situations because marriage is not a fixer. People think marriage is a fixer. Marriage is not a fixer. That is just more work. It's a
I,
lot
I,
of work.
I don't think I'm being condescending when I say to you, Shar, that that's a very brilliant observation and very well stated. Uh, the reality is that we expect and are driven by what our peers think about our relationships, what other people have to say. And if I might, I think one of the reasons that my relationship has worked thus far is because we realized that we had our lives to live.
Mhm.
Other people's lives are their lives. We've got to work out our lives
Mhm.
ourselves without the interference. And this is what it is, the static and the interference that comes from other people. And until you see, we're always wanting to be validated either by our peers or
Yep.
whoever. And that, again, we come back to who we are. Are we at a stage of readiness? Are we aware enough? So I go back now to philosophy 101. Thy man, know thyself. You cannot enter, well, you can, you certainly can, but you should not enter into a relationship until you have discovered who you are.
Mhm.
You are not, you are being irresponsible. It's malpractice to get engaged to somebody, want to get into their lives without even discovering who you are, what you're about, what your purpose is. And so you understand what we're doing here? We're running into situations totally unprepared. So it's like a fireman, right? Who kind of, went through his basic training, and he turns up at a fire in an emergency, but he forgets to put on his oxygen tank, his jacket, protective jacket, and runs into a burning building. That's what we're doing here. We're not preparing ourselves. We're not knowing what it is that we need to have, preparing ourselves with that. And so we're getting into a situation. When we're in the situation now, we don't know how to act. And so we react. And it is that reaction that problems will be. It's funny. I just a little anecdote. My first marriage lasted 3 years. And one of the things that irritated me most, would you believe it? My wife, when she squeezed the toothpaste, she would leave a whole big dent
In the
in
middle.
the middle of the toothpaste. I'm looking at that tube of toothpaste. I'm saying, why would anybody want to do that? And the more I looked at it, the more I got ticked off. I became totally, and it repeated it until eventually I raised the issue and an argument ensued. Now, had I been really prepared, properly prepared, I'd have known that people are, they have their own personalities, and they have their own way of doing things. And I might have been able to de-escalate. If I were prepared with that thought in mind, I would have de-escalated that situation. I would have just simply squeezed it the way I wanted to squeeze it when I want to use it and leave it alone. But you see, I reacted. And this is why I say, people, you first of all get to know yourself and then begin to learn somebody else. But don't try to change the person. That's the other issue that we have. You change. You can only work on you. I can't change you, Jan. I can't change you, Cher. I can only change myself, modify my behavior, And so going into that relationship, a lot of work has to be done. This is why I talk about counseling, because people have got to first of all develop a relationship with themselves, learn to like themselves, respect themselves, before they can get into a relationship where they claim they like and respect the next person. Because if they don't like and respect themselves, hey, it sure as hell isn't going to work.
That's true. I think a lot of people don't even get that, because even when you say that, I'm pretty sure it just goes over a lot of people's head. When it comes on to, you have to first acknowledge yourself, love who you are, be comfortable with who you are, understand who you are before you can actually give yourself to somebody else and try to understand somebody else. Because if you don't understand you, how are you going to understand me? You can't.
Absolutely. So, it's okay. So I'm approaching, come September, 50 years married to the same woman. It seems to me like a short time. Can you imagine that? I can't believe that, for a lot of people, it seems like a profound amount of time. It seems for me like yesterday. Not because everything is hunky dory, nothing's perfect. People
Nope.
have got to understand. I just finished writing an article about truth. One of our biggest challenges, and I'm talking about Black folks, that's my concern, not anyone else so much right now. We fear dealing with the truth. And we've got to begin to digest some truth. There are going to be, it's not a fairy tale thing, marriage. We're going to have problems. We're going to have serious problems of communication, problems with finances,
Mm-hmm.
problems with family members, problems with our children. And so if each individual is not equipped with the various tools to deal with these issues that we have, then there's going to be a problem. It is sad. One of the things that really saddens me is the children, because it is they who are left perplexed, confused, and it takes years for them to get to understand that it was not their fault why their mom and dad went separate ways. All the time, the children, and as resilient as they are, they blame themselves. And so the real serious side effect of a separation, a breakup, is the children. Now, in the absence of children, it makes for a better and more palatable break. But the reality is that some people should not be together. And by the way, the reality is also that some people shouldn't marry.
True.
How about that?
True.
Yeah. You touched on a lot of things that, I really, really wanted to talk on, and especially when it comes to like compatibility. You mentioned, the financial and emotional and all that spirituality. And obviously, based on you just mentioned, it's definitely important for the relationship to actually work. Compatibility is key. But I want to jump into this, and this is about the because we've been talking tonight. Let's talk about the chase. The whole idea that just I have to get married by this age. I have to get married by this age. That whole rundown situation. Um, is it something that's healthy?
No,
I
no.
feel like the only thing there's a clock on is really your fertility. I don't think there's a clock on anything else that you do in life. I really feel
What
like
about
it's
fertility anymore? It's 2021 and people are having children at 50. So tell me.
yes, some people.
Some
There's
people.
still a clock though. It gets more difficult. But when it comes on to like, oh, I have to get married this time so I can have kids by this time. Again, it's society. It's what society taught us. And I'm going to use this word. It's what we were brainwashed to think. Like we were brainwashed to think that, oh, I can't cohabitate with this person before we get married because that's not good. Although getting to know the person is very good. Like I feel like having the experience of living with a person before you get married. A lot of people I say, why are you giving the cow away for free or something? Why would they buy the cow if you're giving away the milk for free? But I think there's value in actually being around that person. I think there's value in kind of seeing like, is this gonna work? Can we actually live together? Because we can be out there and we can live in our separate place and have an amazing relationship. When you come together and you're all in those four walls and you are seeing all those things that you didn't see because you weren't living together, you're seeing his nightly routine, you're seeing his morning routine, right? The toothpaste, you're seeing the screws in the middle. You know what I mean? All of this could have prepared you if you were supposed to get married to this person because you already know these things. So is that you're gonna deal with it, accept it, or you're not? You know, so everything that we do these days, you will look back society. Society says, you know, if I meet this guy today, God forbid, I can't kiss him today. I gotta wait until like 90 days before I kiss him because you know that's what I'm gonna be looked at as this and that or whatever. Like we need to shake off some of that like stereotypical behaviors. Some of them I do say keep, but some of these things that are have us bound so that we can't really express ourselves and we can't really like fully understand the other person. I mean, come on, if you're courting the person, court the right way. Because I believe in courtship. I 100% believe in courtship. I believe in getting to know the person. I believe in having a friendship with this person. Because when you get married, the sex is going to do so much. And that's just real. The sex is going to do so much. When you get into arguments and you get into all that stuff, you have to genuinely like the person. I'm not even talking about love. You have to like that person, really like that person in order for it to like go the distance. That's your friend. That's your homie. Like even if you have a spouse, you go back because guess what? I like this person. And I don't only love this person, I like this person. That's my person. You know what I mean? So we need to let go of some of the societal things and, you know, really know yourself.
So what I'm
who you
getting
know,
here,
you
I'm just like
go ahead,
I'm
John.
trying to take notes as I go along because you know taking some notes and I hope you know taking notes. Know yourself before you jump into a marriage, right? Know yourself, you know, get to know the person, you know, possibly live together because you know people have habits. I have habits. I have habits that you know eventually once you cohabitate with somebody else, they might be annoying to somebody else. So you know those are a few things that what you were saying.
Question. I mean, you know, Sharon, you're provocateur. You provoke thought by your comments and by your observations, and that's a beautiful thing because it sets me thinking about so many things that are left on the table. First of all, who decides what we do in life?
Right?
Like you said, who decides what we do in life? Right? Isn't this our life? And if you and if you are given, understand this, you are given a life. You're given a very unique life. Your life is unlike any other life on the planet for however long it might last. And you are wasting away that life listening to other people taking control of your mind, determining your destiny for you. It means that you're in a bad place. It means that you're not in a place to really develop a relationship with another human being. And let's talk about this love. You know, I love to hear, really love to hear people with a traditional belief system talk about love. You just you fell in love. Fell in love? You fell. Yeah, you fell and hit your head because look, falling in love, there's no such thing. You are attracted to somebody. There's a magnetic appeal that we all have. There are people who look at each other and feel that animal sense of passion arise within them for another person. That's natural. That happens with birds and the bees. This is the way it's set up. We don't talk about these things. We want to talk about it and coach it in all the correctness in biblical terms. There is no such thing. It's a myth. And until we can divorce ourselves, that's the only time divorce is really worthwhile. Divorce ourselves from the myths, from the mythology that we have been told all our lives. You know, I tell you, my I go back to I've experienced it all. My first marriage, after a year, every one of my wife's friends were on her. When are you going to have a little one? When are you going to have a little one? And I could see the pressure mounting. And that lady started going to various doctors because she was at a certain point in her life that she figured she should have. And she started going to different doctors, getting different diagnoses, begin to get stressed, totally stressed out of her mind. Why? Because family and friends are putting pressure. When people put pressure on you, get out of the way. These are not friends, and if they're family members, they really need help. They're not helping you. All right. So you have to determine, your self-determination is what's going to make your life happy. And so I go back. I can't stress enough, ladies, the importance of getting to know yourself. What am I about? What it is that I want out of life? What is my purpose here? And begin now to look at that person. And by the way, this is something we don't do. We don't question people. Women are not asking men questions. The first question you ask the man, his response is, "Why are you asking me so many questions?"
Because I want
Well,
it.
because, and what should your response be? Because I need answers.
Absolutely.
Because, and if you can't provide those answers, then you can't be part of this relationship. And questions, deep questions. You want to find out what the person feels spiritually, mentally, psychologically. You want to know where they're at. And if they're nowhere, and by the way, while I'm on the subject, and I'm going to say something very, well, let me say it. One must be discriminating in terms of who you choose to be with. Discriminating in the sense that, look, if you have gone to school and you have achieved a certain level of education, you have improved your life, and you meet someone that you cannot have a conversation with that can add something to your life, that is compatible, not necessarily agreeable to your way of thinking, but I guarantee you, you are going to have problems if you are on two different levels. And so when I talk about being discriminating, people might think, oh, you mean that because that guy is because he's a mechanic and I'm a nurse or I'm a teacher, I shouldn't. No, there are many mechanics who choose to educate themselves and learn about themselves, and consequently develop awareness about life. And they might not be able to get in a dialectic with you, but they're certainly able to have a good conversation with you and with your peer group.
Absolutely.
Do not, for God's sake, associate with somebody that you can't have a conversation with, and then tell your friends you married this man because he's the strong, silent type.
Back to that. The men that don't speak and you're saying it's strong. I mean, this is good advice. I'm sorry, but this is good advice. And I agree with you completely, because I'm gonna say I'm picky. And I'm picky for the reasons that a lot of people think are stupid. And that's one of them. I am not the kind of person that wants to sit around and not have a conversation. I talk and I talk a lot and I talk about things that are important. And if you and I cannot converse on a level that my intelligence is not looking at and say, okay, cool, we can't. No, I shut it down immediately. We cannot go
I
any further.
agree.
Don't collect any money, go to jail, do whatever, but just don't have to talk to me because I'm gonna be annoyed the whole time. Like, why are you talking to me? I'm gonna
We've
get
had several conversations about this, and it's always like that person has to match our level when it comes on to talking about certain stuff. Because yeah, we can talk about crap and we can laugh and giggle and
Sure.
stuff like that. But when it comes on to having a real deep conversation and your reasoning ability, and stuff like that, that irritates me if I'm talking to you and I'm not getting anything back. Like that irritates everything in me. And that's just
what's
not
your
gonna
thing?
work because we're
What
arguing.
like I'm seated.
Exactly. Like,
So
what are your thoughts?
Do
so
you
so
think
so so I met when I was a youngster, I met a young lady, right? And like you, Jan, I like to talk. But I like to talk not just for talking's sake. I
right?
like to ask questions and for
Mhm.
ideas. And I'm always trying to learn something and I love to share what I've learned. And I'm talking to this young lady and she looks at me and she says, "You talk too much." And I say, "Okay, I mean, I was she knocked me back, right? So I said, "Why do you say that?" And in the vernacular, she said, I don't like to talk to men, and they have so much to say.
Okay.
And it hit me, and it hit me more profoundly, maybe 30 years later when I started counseling. And I realized that there are people who have not been exposed because of their upbringing to conversation, to
Mhm.
sharing,
Mhm.
uh, very often due to no fault of their own. It's their environment that they grew up in. So then again, there are so many things that we really need to be discriminating about. We have to look for because, like anyone else, we are raising the boat, right? We have to lift our community up, and we can't lift our community up by encouraging relationships that are going to diminish all that we've worked for.
Absolutely.
So we constantly are on the search for lifting our community, and that goes through the relationships that we have. Let us be realistic. Um, it's not new, and this is more than old school. This is ancient school. White folks married for certain advantages, certain social privileges and advantages.
Mm-hmm.
Since we are copycats, then begin to at least copy something that makes sense. There are a whole bunch of women who are getting themselves educated, and what I want to do is encourage our men to also get yourselves educated. If you can't get yourselves as educated as our women are doing, at least make an effort to meet them halfway. Because this I look at this as nation building, and all that our forefathers strived for and died for, so that we can have some kind of a forum like this, so we can share ideas and thoughts like this. I think it's all about elevating our status. And if I'm not going to beat up on women like a lot of people do, I am saying to women, you have the opportunity now, and it's believe me, you have the opportunity now more than any time else to begin to address this issue of raising boys into men, because what I see out there right now, they're not men. They even on the field of sport, basketball, football, soccer. These boys are giving up the slightest little injury. They're whimpering like little. I mean, like little boys. They are not acting like men.
Exactly.
They give excuses. Nobody takes responsibility anymore. And the truth is, politicians who want to be politically correct are not talking about it. Our teachers are maybe too afraid to talk about it. Our psychologists, our academics are not saying anything. They live in ivory towers, and they're not contributing anything to this dialogue. How many times have you heard an academic, someone who is supposed to know better, weighing in on the challenges and the problems that our community, our black community is having? They write books. Do they appear on forums like this and talk real practical, sensible things that can help people? I'm not seeing them show up. And this is another deficit we have in our community. So the people who are supposed to be leading us out of this morass, they're in fact alienating themselves from the challenge. Nobody wants to get in the mud. All right. So I don't mind being criticized for the views that I have, because the views that I have are safe views. They're views that are backed up by ancient philosophy, learning, the development of the sciences of mind body, which tells you that if you behave a certain way, then the results are going to appear a certain way. So my construct is simple. In relationships, you referred, Sharon, to courtship.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that relationships can be made stronger through courtships. This online thing, this flash of desperation, for those people that it works for, God bless you. It doesn't often work. And if it does work, it usually has some consequences which people regret later, or it appears to work. Because how can you develop a relationship with someone that you haven't really met? You haven't gone to a game with them. You haven't shared the laughter of going to several movies. You haven't gone to any plays. You haven't gone to any parties together to see the interaction of people. You've done nothing with this person save and except you talk on the phone, you text each other, you FaceTime each other, and then you say you fall in love. Love is not a falling in love thing. Love, and folks, if you're listening and commenting, I want you to know love is a decision. Love is a decision. You make a decision to love somebody. That's where the commitment starts. And that decision is not a cold, analytical decision. It's a decision that is made because your mind and your heart have cooperated in discernment to believe that this person is compatible to you, your soulmates, so to speak. And you make a decision that you are going to be with this person. It's a decision, folks, because love, the same way you fall in, you fall out.
Follow it even harder.
You fall out even harder. All right?
Guys, if you're here, thank you so much for showing up. Thank you for sharing, for liking, for commenting, for being with us in this conversation. I definitely love that too. Love is a decision. Love is definitely a choice that you make every single day to care for this person. So, and I think I love what Shar said earlier about liking someone, because you know what? You know, you could be in a situation, you could love, well, that's a different topic. Can you love somebody and not like them yet? So you have to like
something a whole lot deeper.
No, Sharon,
separate and move on.
Sharon raised the issue. I mean, look,
Yeah, because
there are times.
anger is something that brings out the worst in us, and
Yeah,
it brings out the worst in us. And so if you're angry at someone, you come back to that place where you're showing them affection and care and all those things. You have to really like them to be like, someone like it, that's somebody there really talk to you.
that's right. That's right.
If we never like you, really to them, I just show you at the door or something. But you can. I think you can love somebody and not like them, and that's a whole different ballgame.
Oh yeah, that's a whole different story. Yeah.
That's a whole different conversation.
Yeah.
We're
Oh,
not
yeah.
going to have a conversation tonight, and we're just
Right.
going to leave it at that. And since we all agree that it is completely possible, and period, we're going to put a period right there and carry on. It's just carry on, carry on, because that's a whole different conversation. But I'm going to ask you something, and then we're going to move on to the next segment. What's the most awkward thing about being married? And what's the biggest thing that single people get wrong about marriage? I want to couple those two questions together, and then we move to the next segment. What's the biggest thing that single people get wrong about marriage, and what is the most awkward thing about being married?
I want to answer.
And you're asking me for my.
Yes, both of you,
Yeah.
and both questions.
I don't know.
In terms of awkwardness,
Uh-huh.
I believe the awkwardness comes from our morality, how we are raised, and very often in our society, we're raised in a Christian environment where there is a guilt that is associated with sex. And so the awkwardness comes from a man who is more exposed to the world and has certain belief systems with respect to sex, meets a woman who is feels guilty about sex and about how sex should be cohabited. This creates a tremendous awkwardness, and I found that awkwardness in my first marriage because of the belief system of my wife and what should pass as enjoyable sex and what is correct sex. And so,
All right, that's what I'm talking. What is correct sex? Because
absolutely,
Say that.
and that's an awkwardness that we need to discuss, because we are all filled based on our religious background with this guilt about sex and how to enjoy sex with our partner. And it's not spoken about in Black society, in Black settings. And this is why, can you imagine how difficult it must be for people who are not heterosexual to even begin to coexist? If we have these problems in a heterosexual relationship, can you imagine if the relationship is not heterosexual, how much more difficult and complex it is for people to handle? Big problem. Most often not discussed.
It is. I just want to piggyback on that too, because when it comes on, we talked about Christianity, and then because before you get married, having sex is sin. When you get married and you're able to have sex, now it's no longer having sex is a sin. It's the kind of sex that you have that no.
Precisely. Precisely.
So now it gets complicated, because now in our heads we're like, oh my God, if I do this, I have sinned, but the bed is undefiled. So what are we talking about? Like, why do we have this double standard? That's another topic, but
so do you understand? Do you understand that how we have been socially engineered, socially and psychologically engineered, until we feel guilt in almost everything we do, and look at the other people, and they do whatever. They do whatever. But at the same time, they are telling you, the meek should inherit the earth. Really? But you aren't meek, and you have most of the earth. So look, let's kind of begin to destroy this mythology because it's killing us. It's suppressing us. It's repressing us. It is making us crazy. Believe
It is.
me. And so we need to develop a spirituality of the heart, a spirituality with our Creator that lets us rise above this. Because if we don't, we are a mess.
But it breaks a lot of marriages too, because you have one that is sometimes, like you said, more exposed, and their mindset has been, reconditioned.
Yeah.
They got rid of that old conditioning, and now they've come to the realization that, oh my God, this can be done. There's nothing wrong if I do this in the bedroom. Like, this is my wife, this is my
It
husband.
liberates you. It liberates you. Yes.
Exactly. Then
Yeah.
the other person is on the extreme side, still thinking about the traditional forms of sex and saying,
Yes.
"Oh my God, I can't do that." Then that creates a barrier as well, because now one wants to explore and one wants to be safe. So how does that work?
Yeah. 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 So I mean, it's all these dynamics are in the relationship, and they have to be worked out. And this is why. Okay, so we didn't touch so much on the some people shouldn't get married, and that's a key. There's no reason. There is no reason. It wasn't meant to be that everybody. There's a in every country. I can't think of one now. Maybe Australia, where there's not a disproportionate amount of women to men. Women always outnumber men. Australia, there are maybe other countries like that. But the fact is that there is absolutely no way that everybody can get married.
Or should.
Let's understand that. Let's not. So why do we mythologize this to people that, oh, it's your destiny to be married? Why are we so it is wicked, it is vile, it is dishonest, right? So that's another part of our psychology that we need to demystify and destroy. There are women who are on the planet here for another purpose other than marriage. Marriage is not the single purpose of that's demeaning the female. Marriage is not her. So do you say that to men? That
Right?
you got to get married? Who tells men that
Right?
they have to get married?
It's always a female that has to get married, but
Yeah.
we need to,
Who tells men that they have to get married? So
Nobody.
you see, look, this is a thing. It's part of the slave upbringing that we have just appropriated. You're talking about cultural appropriation. We have done it more than anybody else. We have appropriated white culture, white behavior.
Is that appropriation, or was it forced onto us in a sense, as a means
Well,
of
it was imposed on us. It was imposed
Right.
on us, and then
Did
we
have
chose.
accept it?
Then we
Did we
chose to appropriate it. Then we chose to appropriate it because here's what we're striving for: equality. Equality. We are equal. We've been equal. What are we striving for here? Equality? No. What we're striving for is self-determination. I don't want to be equal. I'm determining my destiny.
You have a point.
I'm not dealing with your equality thing. I'm determining my destiny. And if you look at determining your own destiny, you forget about this equality thing. That makes you determine your own destiny, makes you by very nature unequal. And it is people who do this who find themselves, who begin to find some kind of peace in this very interesting life. This is a very fascinating life.
It is.
Right? It is.
Completely.
And you ladies have opened the Pandora's box that that creates. Yeah. I hope people listen and begin to understand that our first responsibility is to get with ourselves. Please,
Yep.
if I stress nothing else, is to get with ourselves, become self-aware, become self-aware. Have you ever seen sometimes you go to the supermarket, right? Big parking lot, and you see a lady get out of the supermarket. She has 10 bags. She pops open her trunk. She pops open the door, and she has her big purse on her shoulder with all the money in it. And she's bent over in the trunk of the car, stacking their bags, and the door is open. And you stand up, if you're observant, what do you say to yourself? You say to yourself, wow, that lady just doesn't know what's happening around her. She's unaware, totally unaware of what's happening. Door's open. Her head is in the trunk. She's putting in groceries. You could come and remove everything, and she won't know what happened. It is how we live our lives. We live our lives blindly and unaware. We are not looking around. I started writing something called Stop, Look, and Listen. I haven't completed my thoughts yet, but why I started writing it was I remember when I was a kid, my mom took me to the train track to see my first train. And I might have been all of 4 or 5. And she pointed to the sign. And the sign said, if you remember those trains, it says stop, look, listen. That's what you do at a train crossing. And it has stuck in my mind from maybe age 4 or 5 till this day. And I try to, my process now when I'm faced with a challenge is to stop, look, and listen. I didn't get the psychology of it, that it's written in psychological terms, but now I'm understanding. It's all part of how neurologically we should function. And that's the whole thing of getting to know yourself, introspection, stopping, thinking for a moment, having some silence for a moment. When we begin to do that as a people, then we'll begin to understand ourselves. If we're trying to give people just a basic, rudimentary approach to getting to know themselves. If you stop for a moment, very often I'm driving in my car, I turn all the music, I turn the radio off. I am just listening to nothing else but the sound of the road. And I give my mind a chance to dial itself down. Essentially, what I'm doing is shutting out all the noise for a minute. You know, when you do that, your brain works differently. When you get back into yourself, your brain starts giving you ideas that you'll be amazed how productive, how creative you become. Just take time out sometimes to just sit back in a chair, close your eyes, and just reflect. Maybe you start reflecting on the day that you had. Maybe you start reflecting on a good experience that you had, a phone call that you had, a pleasant memory, someone that you just spoke to that you haven't spoken to in a while. You reflect, and you get into a period of just your thoughts, just for a moment. Do that. It's a little bit of it's an inflection point where you say, you know what? Let me just get out of the race for a minute. As a people, we don't do that. We are scurrying like rats all the time. And we're not stopping and we're not thinking. So if we don't stop, look, and listen, guess what? If we don't stop, look, and listen, then we're going to have relationships that just keep cycling, just keep
That's true.
cycling.
I think I want to tap into the second part of the question real quick, which is about single people. What's a mistake they make about marriages? I mean, I have a couple. My first biggest pet peeve is when a single person is talking about marriage or asking about marriage, they're asking a single person. They're not talking to somebody with knowledge and experience.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They're talking to somebody else that is also single, and that person is telling them everything about marriage that they've never been in, never experienced, and probably never will. So that's one of my biggest pet peeves. And we have a lot of people going around saying that they're relationship gurus that are also in failed relationships, that are also struggling in their own relationships and not being forthcoming with what they're experiencing. They're trying to paint this facade like it's perfect, and single people listening to them, single people listening to these people that don't know what they're talking about. They don't have a clue. All they have is what they see on the television. That's it. That's what they know about it. Because if you've never been in it, how are you going to talk to me about a marriage when you've never been in one? How are you going to tell me how to handle a situation in a marriage when you've never been in one? You've never had to deal with this situation. Well, you're going to tell me based on the books that you've read. Okay, you read a couple books, but I want real life experience. So I think that's one of the biggest, I don't know if it's a mistake, but it's a pet peeve that I have with single people when it comes on to relationships.
And my pet peeve, my big pet peeve, and your observations again are right on. My pet peeve are people who pose as modern day psychologists, therapists, who are pontificating about relationships when their lives are a total disaster. 4, 5 marriages, serially. Hello, and people are listening, and they're writing books,
Mm-hmm.
and these books are selling.
Mm-hmm.
Another serious pet peeve is, why doesn't our community, our Black community, talk to professionals, Black professionals, about their challenges? It's ironic, but guess where they go? They go to white folks who have absolutely no knowledge of their upbringing, of their lifestyle, of their
Mm-hmm.
environment, of their thought process. You realize that psychology and psychotherapy is just a little over 100 years old, and it came out of Europe. Now, we don't look here, with all the challenges of slavery and oppression that we have had, the psychoses that come out of Europe, we're not experiencing them. The kind of problems, mental, psychological problems that emerge from the European construct, we're not seeing them in our communities. How can
Mm-hmm.
these folks truly? Oh yeah, they're right. And when we go to college, we kind of have to do the work, and we've got to quote them in order to get. Oh, hopefully, there will be a gradual change. Just throw the whole, water on the fire, or to throw fuel on the fire. When you talk about, people are getting real upset now all over the country about critical race theory, and they don't understand the origin of critical race theory. Critical race theory simply means that all the things that we have been taught as Black folks in schools, or many of the things we have not been taught because they don't want us to become aware of the impact of our ancestors. When did we start learning about Wall Street, Black Wall Street? Hmm? When did we start learning about Juneteenth
Mhm.
and the effect of, when did we start learning these things? So it's been kept away from us. This is why it is necessary for critical race theory to take place. It is a balancing out. It is saying this is the truth that hasn't been told to you. This is why white folks are getting so upset and so antsy about the real history, the real story being taught. So far, all has been taught is his story. Now we need to know our story. And so again, what how is it? Am I being discordant when I raise this? And no, I'm not, because I frame this because until we know ourselves, until we begin to know about us, what our history is, at least some of it, which makes us think bigger. It makes us realize our potential as we see what our forefathers fought and died for. It makes us prouder. It makes us want to go back to school and learn a little bit more. Not necessarily university. There are other ways to learn. It makes us want to go back to books. It makes us want to have conversations like this so we can learn a little bit more about ourselves. Why it is important that as a people to have better relationships, we need to become lifelong learners. We need to start learning. Look, one of the worst things you can do is tell a black person, invite them to a seminar. Well, we're having a seminar right now, right? We're having it's in the form of a conference. You tell a black person to come to a seminar. Oh, I'm gonna have to sit and listen to him talk and listen to her talk.
There is no.
So what is that saying? What is that saying? It's saying that I don't want to know. Knowledge is too much for me. I don't want to learn anything more. Is that what we're saying? Is that what we're saying when our children speak well and folks say, oh, they're trying to sound white? Really?
Can we also talk about that? Because,
Yeah.
not right, but not right now. That's definitely,
Yeah.
something that we can, but it's so true. Like everything you're saying is so true. We tend to, pass off things that black people do in excellence. Like we're afraid of celebrating black excellence because it looks too much like a mirror of what white excellence should be. But give us props for surviving and being innovative in an environment that chooses to oppress us. Like give
Absolutely.
us the taps on our shoulders and the support that we need as black people together and individually, because each one reach one, and we have to be our brothers and sisters keepers. So if we're not celebrating our excellence in our community, what are you doing? Are we supposed to wait on other people to come and celebrate us?
Exactly.
We can't do that.
And that's the reason for where it's at. A simple, it might sound so simplistic, guys, but I'm telling you the truth. I remember it impacted on me in 1991, 92, more so than ever, because I'm reading the daily news
Mm-hmm.
and I'm reading the story of a man that I later met and did some television shows with. A black guy, and a story he was being featured in a story. And this is a good looking black man. And I could barely discern his features. I could barely identify it. Had I not known this guy, it looked like a mugshot. And I began to look more carefully, and I began to share my thoughts with the people that I spoke to. Why are we represented this way? Every black person, no matter how much they've achieved, when they're in the papers, the black and white photo of them always looks like a mugshot, muddy and weird looking. And then I started looking at television, and I realized that the black folks on television, in order to look better, they started putting makeup on them to make them look lighter. And then you would see over a period of years women, black women on television begin to evolve and morph into lighter looking women. And I began to really consider this seriously. There are two things involved here. One, the fact is the camera was never designed for the black face. You do know that, right? The camera was never developed for the black
No,
face,
what?
for the black skin tone. That's a fact. So as we emerged as a force in American society and international society, and pressure, our people now began to go to the MITs and the Harvards and so forth, it became clear that this was a willful strategy. The cameras were designed by white engineers who all they saw were white people. So the filters were never done to make black people look good. It is just in real. And by the way, the technology is just now beginning to improve. Facial recognition, a so-called science that's been developed. There is a black sister, I think, I can't remember, I think she's out of MIT, who has just broken open the reality, the news, that facial recognition being used by the police forces all over America are inaccurate as it pertains to black people. Because the men, again, who created this technological device, they were white men, young white men who had no black friends, who did not test it on any black person. So a black person can be picked up innocently and identified as a murderer or some other kind of criminal by this facial recognition, which is false. So there are things we need to know. We need to get with the program that we have. So I started out by saying, I saw these images and I said to myself, I don't want my people to look like this. So whatever platform we create, I said that to my son and I had that discussion. Whatever platform we create, we want to see our people in color, in living color. So I refused, and Chris refused to do and Annette refused, and Michelle refused to do a black and white paper. Not because we don't value a black and white paper, but it just doesn't make us look good. And I want us to look good. We should look good.
Absolutely.
We should be our best at all times.
I agree with
you. Seeing me now, I am darkened in this image because the cameras were not designed for my dark skin. And so we have to use a lot of filters, a lot of lighting to enhance us, to make us look lighter to fit the camera. Isn't that something?
Yes, I have so many lights around me. Yeah. Oh my God.
So go back, I want folks to just go back, do some reading, begin to start acquainting yourselves, my brothers and sisters, with what's happening around us, because we are slaves. We'll remain slaves if we don't know.
Man, hey, this has been a really great conversation tonight. Like, we have touched on so many different things that may lead into a whole different conversation. I want to thank everybody that's been listening to us, from whether it's from Shar Glow Up YouTube, or it's from the Miki Chronicles, or from the Where Itz At platform. I want to thank you guys for joining us. Next week's topic is going to be, got it right here, the friends your mother warned you about. What do real friendships look like? And that's a whole nother ball game. That has so many dimensions to cover. So please do join us again for another riveting conversation. We are learning a lot. As I'm having these conversations, I'm learning a lot too. So we want to thank you guys for staying with us. And if you know anybody that, would want to hear these conversations, please share it with them, and let them know we're here on a Friday. What time again? 6 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and 7 p.m. Jamaica time. Got that right. Yeah, guys. So yeah, guys. Thank you guys again for watching, and until next time. Talk to you then.
Thank you for your uplifting company. Thank you very much.
Thank you.